Oh hello, welcome to another Tabletop Impulse video, and today we're going to be talking about the different types of kill team. As you'll know, if you've been following kill team for a long time, there are now a lot of different bespoke teams. And I am a bit perturbed that we don't have a very developed, let's say, lexicon for categorizing those bespoke teams. So, let's talk about bags. Those of you who are channel members have seen some of this before, in more ways than one. But it's also something I've talked to Zimbad a lot about as well, and now I'm bringing it into the public eye. I like to think about teams as bags of stats and bags of tricks. A bag of stats team is one where the power of the team is really obvious. It comes from the data cards. Maybe the team has punchy weapons like plasma guns, or maybe they just have really good stat lines and solid weapons like intercessors. Conversely, a bag of tricks team is a team that on paper it's really difficult to see how they're going to accomplish anything. But by proper application of their special rules and really deep learning of the team, you can do really very well. So I suppose the archetypical bag of stats kill team would be Intercession Squad, and the archetypical bag of tricks kill team would probably be the Sisters Novitiates. So, thinking about that, and thinking about all the teams in the game, I came up with this. That's right, it's a 4-quadrant chart. The internet loves 4-quadrant charts, and here's my 4-quadrant chart. So originally I was going to make a tier maker type thing, not to do a tier list per se, but to, just to sort the teams between bags of stats and bags of tricks. And then I saw that on the tier maker website there's a button to do a 4-quadrant chart. They call it an alignment chart, but I'm more familiar with it as a political compass. Let's just call it a 4-quadrant chart. And I decided to put in the Horde and Elite axis. So the way this works is over here, these are teams that are more numerate Horde teams, and these are teams that are less numerate Elite teams. So there's some interesting things that come about when you plot things on 4-quadrant charts in this way. So if we start off here with green, let's have a look at the green zone. So the green zone here, at this top end of the chart, these are the 3 teams in the game that have more than 10 miniatures. So the, as we know, the Vetguard have 14 models, and the Bloodied and the Tau Pathfinders have 12. Then, in the middle here, which I will colour in for you in red, we kind of have the red zone. These are all of our 10 model teams. Now, I know that they're not all on top of each other on the axis. That's just because of the fact that the images had a certain size to them, right? But this red zone here is these are all the 10 model teams, okay? And we'll go through them individually in a minute. And then in the middle, we've kind of got the oddball. So the 4 oddball teams here that are weird and different. And then at the top end, we have the Elite 6 model Elite teams, right? So let's talk about them first of all. Let's start at the top end because that's kind of the easiest place to start, I suppose, for looking at the different teams. So we have Intercession Squad and Chaos Legionaries. And down here, the Phobos. So, Intercession Squad and Chaos Legionaries, I feel quite comfortable to kind of group them together because they're more or less doing the same thing, right? They are very elite teams that are very straightforward to play. They are, essentially, they have the guns and the stats they have to play well. Now, interestingly, they both have something really similar going on in that there's a little bit of trickiness to them, but it's trickiness that you can outsource to the internet. They have the intercessors have their chapter traits, and the legionaries have their marks of chaos. But these are things that you can research online. You can look at things on YouTube, things in Discords, things on other websites, and you can find out what the competitive players think is the best way of running those teams. And that's quite rare. It's normal in 40k and Age of Sigmar, but it's quite rare in Kill Team that you can actually kind of outsource some of your kind of game winning logic. Right, most of the time in Kill Team, it comes down to decisions made on the table. With these two teams, there are other teams that have little bits as well, but with these two teams in particular, there are large things that you can kind of outsource to somebody else's maths or tactical acumen. Now, one team I do want to bring in here is the Thousand Suns. Played as I play them, the Thousand Suns, or not as I play them, but as I've talked about them being played, I don't actually play Thousand Suns, but I did a video on them recently based on my experiences with them. And I actually think the Thousand Suns, which signified here by kind of a demented Teletubby creature, they could easily go there if you run them as a 6-man elite team. They are a slightly more tricky, slightly less kind of stat heavy, because they're only APL 2, 6-man elite team that would sit alongside these other 6-man elite teams. The reason that I have them on the diagram where I have them is because, of course, they also have the option to be played with 10 Zangors, affectionately called bird goats in these parts. So you can have 10 bird goats led by a sorcerer, which makes them a rather more horde team, so that should really push them this way. So we meet in the middle, and I've kind of put them in the middle here because you can have any kind of mix of Zangors and Thousand Suns as you see fit. And the Thousand Suns are, they're quite a tricky team. So yeah, they're down here on their own, on the tricky side of things. They could possibly be a bit further up to the top. They have got AP1 on all their weapons. They have got 3 up armor saves. But there's also that kind of APL2 thing going on. There's also, and if you take more Sangors, you dilute their statiness, right? And you promote their having to be tricky to get the best out of their Sangors. So that's why they're kind of down there. If you run them as pure Marines, like I say, they could be up a bit and along a bit to this kind of Teletubby location over here. And then down here on their own, we've got the Phobos. They're the only really elite team that's tricky. And that's probably why they kind of aren't real regarded at the moment. They're the only team that's really trying to do what they're trying to do. And I think a lot of people are trying to play them as if they were one of these elite teams at the top. They're not. They have to be tricky. You have to know how to use them. And you can't just use them like you use intercessors or legionaries. I'm going to push over to the other side for a minute and talk about the other teams on the left-hand side. So the Vet Guard, I feel it's really uncontroversial that they're the leftmost team. They're the 14-man team. They are a stats team, not the raw stats on the cards, of course, but the excellent weapons they can bring and the number of excellent weapons that they can bring means that they are very much a stats team. You look at their cards and you can see exactly how they are going to win games. Now, the Pathfinders are a similar story. I know a lot of people are going to say, hang on, Phil, you've gone absolutely mad. You've been supping on too much of this delicious whiskey. The Pathfinders do not belong in the stats section of the chart because they are a tricky team with marker lights and shenanigans and chain activations and the Mon Car and Mon au contraire internet commentator man. Tau are really good because they have really good guns and because you get 12 Tau. I feel like a lot of the other things, like they had some good tricks as well. The tricks all got nerfed away, and they're still a good team. Why? 12 men, good guns, right? They are a bag of stats team. A bag of stats team doesn't mean that they're hardy, but they have really good built-in offensive power. Now we're going to come down and look at the Bloodied. So the Bloodied are a bit more tricky. They've got their complicated Bloodied mechanic, and in exchange they get less in the way of weapons. You can still take a plasma gun, you can still take a sniper rifle, but ultimately you have to try and make their kind of melee gimmick work if you want to play well with the bloodied. So that's why they're further down towards the tricks section. They're still here on the left-hand side because they are a very hoardy team with potentially 12 miniatures in it. Right. Let's get the pen again. So I want to talk about these three teams up here. These are probably the most simple to play 10-man teams if that's what you want to do. Now, one of these things is not like the other, right? So Hunter Clade are currently regarded as one of the best teams, one of the best bespoke teams in Kill Team, which is really funny considering that I remember them being one of the worst, or in fact the worst bespoke teams in Kill Team. But there you are. Hunter Clade are really having their cake and eating it because they have access to a fair number of Sicarians who are elite scale models, and then backing those Sicarians up, they can take kind of Vet Guard equivalent models with plasma guns and Cavaliers and all sorts of other random things. So the Hunter Clade are a really powerful team, but they're still in this grouping with two less powerful teams because remember, this chart is not about power. Things are not close together because they're equivalent in power level. If some things that are equivalent in power level have been grouped close together, that just shows you that those kinds of teams, elite and stat-heavy teams, are quite powerful. It's quite a powerful combination, but if things are grouped together, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm saying they're equal in power level. Mechanicum are obviously not the same sort of power level as Kazakin or Commandos. So, what's going on here? Well, I've put them here because they are all pretty straightforward teams whose strength, such as they are, is on their data card. Yes, there are mechanics. The Mechanicum have their their special mechanic where they choose the mode that they're going to be in that used to have a debuff, and then the debuff got removed by the FAQ, and people think that's why they're good, and in my opinion, it's far more that they've got an extra Sicarian now as averse to their kind of mechanical advantage thing that they have, but I could be wrong about that. The Commandos barely have any special rules. They have one, really, where they can charge out of Conceal, and the Kazakin have the elite mechanic, which seems complicated. It's not really that complicated. Really, their main strengths are that they have carapace armor, and they can bring quite a lot of special weapons. And then down here, we have kind of this section of what we've got left on this side. Now, these are all 10-man teams that are quite tricky, right? Breachers are the punchier end, okay, because they have access to sort of heavy and special weapons. The crew, I guess, are trying to be the same thing as the breachers. They just do it much less well. Again, proximity on this table does not indicate approximate power level. It just means that they're trying to play the game in roughly the same sort of way. As far as stats versus tricks and Horde versus Elite go. And then you've got the Genestealer Cult, the Eldar Corsairs, and down here, Queens, I should probably say, of the tricks, the Sisters Novitiates, and similar to them, I feel, although obviously less powerful, are the Rogue Traders, the Star Striders. Okay, both teams that are stat line wise and equipment wise pretty poor, and then you look at their abilities, and that's how they accomplish things. And then in the middle, we've got the oddball teams. Now, I've already talked a lot about the Thousand Suns, right? Now, the Thousand Suns, we've covered those off. Let's look at the troop first here. I have them classed as a stats team. You might want to call them an elites team. They are an elites team, right? They're not as elite as these 6 model guys. They're 8 models. They're kind of their own weird thing. You might want to call them a tricks team, rather, because they have... they have their SADAFs, they have a lot of different things that they do, but ultimately they're a stats team. They have APL3, they have Fly, they have a Melter Pistol, and they're otherwise pretty good at fighting. That's why they are good. It's those basic things. Everything else just helps. I'm not saying these teams up on this top half of the table have no special rules and don't benefit from their their specialists or their ploys. Of course they do, and they do derive benefit from those things. But the main power that you can see in Harlequins is on the stat card, right? Gellerpox Infected are really hard to categorize because do you count them as a horde team? Because the little gribblies that you can have kind of count towards their ultimate size of their list, or do you count them as an elite team? Because really, the only models that are worth worrying about in that team are the 4 huge hulks. So I've left them there on the sort of just to the horde side of the midpoint, but really they kind of defy characterization on the horde elite axis kind of uniquely, right? But they are very much a stats team. They are good because they're big and they're bulky and they do big bulky things and they've got feel no pain, and so I've put them up here. And then finally we come to the Necrons. The Necrons are another weird outlier team. So Necrons have a weird, a weird number of models in your team compared to the rest of the guys in the game. They've got some really big guys, and they've got some kind of, all their guys are kind of bulky, so they feel almost like an elite team and almost like a horde team in a way. These 4 teams are kind of approximate in that they kind of defy the horde or elite kind of designation. The Necrons are very, very tricky. You won't win games with Necrons unless you've mastered all their tricks. You've mastered what you're doing with the Necron Lord. You've mastered the nuances of the resurrection mechanic. So that's how I vaguely categorise the teams. Now, to make it a bit more interesting, let's just have a look and think to ourselves which teams, and this isn't my opinion, which teams are commonly regarded in the meta as being in contention for the top sort of table. So what the names I see floating around are Intercession, Legionary, right? Definitely not Phobos, not Thousand Suns. Troop, yes, people say Troop are competitive. Not Necrons, people do say Poxwalkers are competitive. Not Kazakin, not Commandos, but yes, definitely Hunter Clade. People definitely say they're competitive. People say that the Breachers are competitive. The Novitiates, people say, are competitive. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to colour in all of these Super Horde teams, right, the plus 10 man teams, and say that they are generally regarded now as being competitive. Bloodied weren't always regarded as being competitive, but now I think people have kind of cracked the Bloodied and are doing really well with them. So, I mean, tell me I'm wrong in the comments, look, but my perception of listening to what people say, these teams that I've shaded in yellow are kind of the ones that people view as being competitive picks. And that's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 teams versus not coloured in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've coloured in half the teams. I think half the teams are generally regarded as competitive. But we can see where these teams lie. And it's quite interesting. So of the teams that I've coloured in, the majority of them are on the top of the table. The majority of them are stats-based teams. There's very few teams that I've classified as tricky teams that people really get excited about and say can go on to win loads of games. Okay, so first thing to notice is these are all stats-based teams up here. Second couple of thing that's interesting, really, is, we can look at the groupings, right? So these are both regarded as pretty competitive. Interestingly, the World Championships or the Masters or whatever it is that Games Workshop are calling the Grand Narrative event that wasn't a narrative event, that was a highly competitive event, but that was titled the Grand Narrative event. I have no idea. Nobody was playing Intercessors or Legionaries. And yet these are regarded as, is really what we're saying is these are the kind of the archetypical gatekeeper teams. I mean, Zimbad's going to roll his eyes at me because he beats me every single day with Intercessors. But is it the case that I'm being gatekept because I can't play the game? I mean, that's also possible. But I would still regard these competitive teams. I regard them as quite similar teams, especially they both skew with their special rules towards defensibility as well. And then in the middle, we've got the two teams that are oddbally, that are more stats heavy. So the Harlequins and the Plague fellows, again, they're regarded as competitive, where the teams that kind of correspond to them are not necessarily regarded as competitive. And up here, again, the Clade are regarded as competitive. The Orcs and the Kazakin less so. They just don't have enough of something to make them a competitive team. People, I think, want them to have more, either more special weapons or more tricks or something that would improve them a little bit. But they're the only two that I've got above this elite line. And you've got to ask yourself then, what do Kazakin have? Not Kazakin, sorry. What do Hunter Clade have that these other two teams in the yellow area don't have? And I think it's what I call a cake and eat it quality. So I believe that there are two teams that kind of are all things to all people. So we look at the Hunter Clade and the Breaches. These have something going for them where they're kind of tricky and statty at the same time, right? I think of Hunter Clade as being a stats-based team with a good helping of tricks, and I think of Breaches as being a tricks-based team with a really good helping of stats. And I think that they kind of work really well by having a foot in both camps, and that makes them pretty popular. And then really we see the only two teams that people regard as really competitive that are down here in the Horde section, really. The Novitiates and the Bloodied. Well, the Bloodied are popular because they have more men. Depending on your choices with the Ogryn and the Commissar, of course. But you can take quite a lot of men with the Bloodied, which is really powerful. I think it's really important to say that all three of these teams in the more than 10 men camp are, regarded as highly competitive. And the Novitiates, of course. Well, long-time followers of this channel will know that I have lost a lot of games with Novitiates. They don't quite click with me. Obviously, I've now moved on to trying to main the Starstriders, who are the team I've identified as being the most similar to the Novitiates. Obviously, the kind of team that appeals to me in the abstract is not necessarily, I guess, the kind of team that I'm going to go on to win games with. Possibly, I should be playing one of these teams up here. They would give me more of a leg up as a relatively, I don't want to say incompetent, but as a relatively unskilled player. I should be playing one of these teams, perhaps. But alas, I'm trying to struggle away down here in the opposite end of the quadrant chart. Maybe that's part of my problem. I don't know. But yeah, that's my kind of ramble and thought about these quadrants that I've come up with. I think that they make a little bit of sense. I think I see some interesting patterns there in terms of what people think and what's viable and what's not viable, and what teams are grouped together. I think there's something there. You let me know. I mean, is this something, or is this simply a tale told by an idiot full of sound of fury signifying nothing? I mean, I don't know whether I've come up with something genuinely good and interesting in the bag of stats, bag of tricks idea or not. Now, I did get one comment from one of my members when I kind of floated this idea initially, saying, oh, well, yeah, we already have words for that in X-Wing. That's ace ships and beef ships, right? Ace and beef. I like tricks and stats. It's more descriptive. So maybe I'm reinventing the wheel, but at least I'm reinventing a wheel and presenting it to the Kill Team community, who haven't necessarily seen this wheel before, which is pretty par for the course for Games Workshop, I suppose. The Games Workshop community when thinking about how they interact with the wider miniatures hobby, but I digress. Do you think So first of all, I'd love comments on whether you think this is a good idea or not. I would also love some comments on whether or not I fundamentally misunderstand any of the teams. But be aware that really the point of this video and this ramble is not my placement of these teams on this grid. I am not a good player of Kill Team, and I haven't played, there are teams on here that I've never played into or against. I've never played into or against Kazakin. I've never played into or against Kroot. I've never played into or against Breaches. I've never played into, into and against the same thing, but you get the idea. I've never played with or against Breaches. I don't think I've ever played with or against Corsairs, even. I've not played with or against the Poxwalkers. I think That's it, yeah. So there's at least 5 teams there that I've really arguably got no idea. The main thing I'm trying to prove here is the concept of the grid. Is it useful to think about sort of stats teams and tricks teams? And as long as Horde and Elite's not new, everybody talks about, oh, these are the Horde teams and these are the Elite teams. Everybody's got that fixed in their head. And I think for a lot of people, there's kind of this idea that, oh, if something is an elite team, it's automatically a stats team, and if something is a horde team, it's automatically a tricks team. And I think that the kind of dodgy thinking there that is leading to Phobos really struggling, and Vetguard and Tau being kind of roundly misunderstood, because I don't think the two things are synonymous. Obviously, yes, the Horde and Trick quadrant is the busiest quadrant, for sure. There are more teams that are both Hordey and Tricky than there are anything else, and there are more teams that are Hordey at all than Elite. That's also true, although not if you were to add in all the Compendium teams, for sure. The Compendium team basically skews stats and Elite, but we don't really care about the Compendium. So let me know as well there if you think I'm fundamentally misplaced any of the teams. If you detect a little bit of irritation in this video, I mean, look, channel members know why. This video has been kind of cursed. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th time I'm trying to record the video, which is why I have a delicious glass of single malt whiskey. Because frankly, it's the only way I can face telling all the same jokes again. And normally I like my content to be totally unrehearsed, and they were all sound issues, viewers. It was all sound issues again. So, if you've enjoyed this ramble, if you're new to the channel and this is your first video, that's a strange introduction to the channel. But if you enjoyed it, do subscribe. That really helps me out. It helps out every YouTube channel you watch, everywhere, anywhere. People need to understand that subscribing isn't really for you. It's not really for you, so you can keep track of which channels you want to come back to. It's the single biggest thing you can do to show your support to another YouTube channel. Please also consider expanding the description and looking at Discords and socials, Instagrams, all those kinds of things you can follow me on. Some of them are embarrassingly unfollowed, so if you're on the channel and you use Instagram and you want painted Warhammer popping up in your feed, consider that. And finally, some of you may wish to consider channel membership. Just click the join button down the bottom there. You get kind of content that's like this, but worse. If you can imagine such a thing, you get behind the scenes type videos. You get, like, I can't be bothered making a PowerPoint, I'm just going to turn the camera on and see what happens kind of videos. You get the version of this video that was almost this video until it went totally hilariously wrong. That's for the members. So consider that. If you want to leave a tip, there's like a super thanks button. You can be one of the first people in YouTube history to use the super thanks button. That's also an option. Yeah, other than that, have a great evening. Hope you enjoyed the video, and cheerio. And I'm now just praying to God that the sound actually will work when I press the stop recording button, which I'm going to do right now.